Hi everybody. Today's lesson obviously will be done online, and I have printed out the slides for this and also some worksheets to go along with it. So you can use those slides to complete your notes and then just complete the questions in the worksheet. In the last lesson on Monday, we looked at the development of an embryo from a zygote, so from a fertilized egg, and talked about the fact that the cells start to change at that blastocyst point, which you might remember. And we're going to look at that a bit more today, particularly looking at stem cells, which you may have heard of before. So cell differentiation or specialization, those words are kind of used interchangeably, describes the process that allows cells to become specialized or different, really. So remembering that we have a zygote, which is just one particular type of cell, but of course, as adults, we are not all just versions, copies of the same cell. We have all these different types of cells. Okay, so that happens through cell differentiation or specialization. If you look at the different functions of cells, depending on a cell's job, it will have a different size. So for example, neurons are very, very, very long cells, but are very small. Very thin, whereas red blood cells are tiny cells, okay, but they're both cells. They would have different amounts of organelles. So, organelles that break down food in digestive tracts would have lots of lysosomes that have enzymes to break things down. Muscle cells would have lots of mitochondria because they need lots of energy. They'd be found in different locations. Generally you don't find liver cells in your hair because that's not your liver. And also, we've looked at this before, but they have different lifespans. So we know things like skin cells tend to get regenerated very quickly, and we lose them after a few days, while nerve cells last forever or until they are destroyed. And as I kind of mentioned before, through differentiation, we are able to go from a single fertilized egg, so a fusion of two cells there, to the over 200 different types of cells that are found in the body. Okay, so focusing mostly today on stem cells. And if you think of a stem being, something that kind of leads and branches out to something else like a tree, that's basically what we're talking about here with cells. So stem cells are what we call undifferentiated cells, meaning they are not yet different, that can become many, many different types of cells. Okay, there are a couple of different examples of this, but a good example to get your head around is the stem cells that are found in bone marrow. So bone marrow is kind of the fleshy material inside bones. That's full of these cells called bone stem cells, and they give rise to all the different types of blood cells in the body. Okay, so all blood cells come from bone marrow. Bone marrow stem cells have not yet changed to be either a red blood cell or a white blood cell or a platelet. When we look at stem cells, and we'll look at a couple of examples, most stem cells, with the exception really of a very small few, are already partially differentiated. And what that means is they've already started to become a certain type of cell and can only get more specialized in that area. Okay, got a picture there, but I'll draw another one here. Let's imagine that, this is the zygote down here. This is the first cell. Obviously, the zygote can become any cell because that's the first cell, and we know that all of our cells came from that. But then, remember we looked at the other day, we've got the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. They are the three germ layers of the blastocyst, of the inner cell mass of the blastocyst has these three layers. Now the ectoderm becomes the linings of most of the internal organs. The mesoderm becomes the kind of the flesh of a lot of those organs. Sorry, the ectoderm becomes the skin. The endoderm becomes the organs. So if a cell has already become an ectoderm stem cell, which becomes things like skin, linings of, different tracts, nerve cells, that cannot now become, say, blood cells, which are part of the mesoderm. Okay, it can only keep specializing in that particular area. Okay, so another example, blood stem cells can only become blood cells. They can't then become nerve cells or muscle cells because they've already started to become too specialized in that area. Okay, I guess the opposite to that is that a cell, let's say, so this is the zygote, then down here we've got our three germ layers, and you'll see the colors here. So these cells only become more specialized ectoderm, these become more specialized mesoderm, these become more specialized endoderm. This can't now cross over to there, that doesn't work. But also a cell can't reverse in that process. Okay, so if a cell has specialized into being a lung cell, it can't now go back to being an unspecialized endoderm cell. Okay, so they can only, I guess, develop in one way, same as we can't get younger. Okay, there are three types of stem cells, and when I say types, I mean three, I guess, levels of strength of stem cells. The first one is what we call totipotent. Okay, I want you to think about the word potential and what potential means. So potential obviously is, the ability to do something or become something. And then toti meaning total. Okay, a totipotent stem cell has total potential, meaning it has the potential to become any type of cell. Okay, it has not differentiated in any way yet. It can become any type of cell, and where we find totipotent stem cells are the zygote. The zygote itself is totipotent because it can become any cell, up until the point of the morula, which, remember, is kind of like that ball of cells that are exact mitotic copies of the zygote. Okay, they're the only cells that are totipotent. They can become anything. The next, I guess, level down in terms of strength are what we call pluripotent. Pluri, thinking like plural, means many. So it has many potentials. I know potentials isn't really a word, but it has many options to become different types of cells. These can become any type of cell in the growing fetus. The only thing that these cells can't become is the placenta. So hopefully you remember we had the morula, which is just a mass of exact copies of the zygote. Then we have the blastocyst, and you should have a picture of this in your notes. The blastocyst, which has an outer cell mass and an inner cell mass. The outer cell mass becomes the placenta. Okay, the inner cell mass becomes the fetus. Okay, so these cells in the inner cell mass are pluripotent, and they will become, or can become, any type of cell in the growing fetus and then in that person after they are born. And then finally, we have what's called multipotent stem cells. They have multiple potential. Not as strong as pluripotent, and certainly not as strong as totipotent. But they've still got a fair bit of opportunity to specialize. So they are partially differentiated already. So these are things like blood stem cells. So they've already become blood stem cells or nerve stem cells, but they're not quite a red blood cell yet or a white blood cell yet. So they can still become either of those. And these are the stem cells that are found in embryos. Remembering as soon as this blastocyst implants into the uterus, it now becomes an embryo. So cells found in embryos, in the fetus, and then also in adults. So stem cells, some stem cells stay in the body throughout all of our life, and that's where our new cells come from. So as adults, we do have multipotent stem cells, but remembering they are partially differentiated. A nerve stem cell can't now become a blood cell. It's already specialized a little bit. What I'd like you to do here is pause this video and just go through the questions on page 1 of the worksheets that I've printed out. There's a bit more reading you can do on there, and maybe, let's say, take 15 minutes to go through those questions, 10 to 15, and then come back to the video. Okay, so we've looked at what stem cells are, and I guess the really important thing, or the reason that we teach you about these things, is that they are a really exciting type of medical treatment that can be used in what's called stem cell therapy. So they can be used to treat a variety of conditions that require new healthy cells. Keeping in mind, stem cells are almost like, young cells that aren't yet specialized. And if they can be, used to, or be stimulated to divide and specialize, they can become new healthy cells. So they can be really useful at treating things such as certain types of cancer. So for example, leukemia, which is a cancer of the blood and of white blood cells, someone can get a bone marrow transplant and the stem cells within that bone marrow will produce healthy white blood cells that person can't produce for themselves. They can be really useful in treating things like heart disease. If you can create new cardiac muscle tissue, so if someone has a heart attack and some of their heart tissue has kind of wasted away, stem cells can be used to kind of regenerate that. Also really useful for things like burns, for replacing, so skin cells themselves regenerate quite easily, but if the cells that produce skin cells get damaged, you can replace them with skin stem cells and that person will be able to regrow skin. Okay, so there's lots and lots of uses for them, and a little bit of, I guess, controversy in how they can be used. So the stem cells themselves can either come from embryos or from adults. And when we say adults, you'll see that it doesn't just mean, someone who's over the age of 18. But we refer to either embryonic stem cells or adult stem cells, which we'll go through now. So embryonic stem cells come from the inner cell mass of a blastocyst. So keeping in mind, remember the blastocyst had this outer cell mass and it had this inner cell mass, but we can all agree it looks nothing like a baby. It's really just a mass of cells. So even though it's the earliest stage of an embryo, we still refer to these as embryonic stem cells. They come from that inner cell mass. The benefits of embryonic stem cells, and if you go back to the thing we just did about the potency, embryonic stem cells are pluripotent. Okay, so they are, apart from the totipotent zygote, they are as strong as you can get in terms of stem cells because they can become any cell type in the body. They can't become the placenta, that's it. Okay, so because of that, they have the most potential to treat a range of conditions. cells taken from here could become blood cells, skin cells, liver cells, muscle cells, nerve cells, the whole lot. Okay, so they've got lots and lots of use in medical treatments. The issue with embryonic stem cells, or I guess the debate around it, is that to produce them, it requires the deliberate creation and destruction of embryos. Now, keeping in mind, like I said before, these don't involve a fetus. So I guess the debate comes from, at what point, do you believe that life is life? Many people would argue that a cell, an ovum, that has been fertilized with a sperm is not really yet a living thing. It's a fertilized cell. And if we let it grow to this point, it's still just a bunch of fertilized cells. Other people would say that is the beginning of life, and that you shouldn't destroy that. So it has become a bit of an ethical issue. Okay, I want you to put your scientist hat on, and you should be able to really think about the ethics around something and weigh up the benefits and the issues. And in the next lesson, that's actually something you're going to be doing, is looking at that. Okay, so but from a scientific standpoint, embryonic stem cells are the most useful in terms of the way that they can treat a huge range of conditions. Adult stem cells are the stem cells that are found in certain tissue types. Common ones are the brain, bone marrow, which we talked about. Fat is quite rich in stem cells. In adults, children, and then the umbilical cord blood. So even in the fetus, which we wouldn't destroy fetuses to use their stem cells, but at that point we would say that those stem cells are adult stem cells. Even though obviously a fetus is nowhere near being an adult, its cells have specialized to the point that they are considered adult stem cells. The benefits of adult stem cells, I guess, is kind of the reverse of the embryonic ones. So these don't require the destruction of embryos. So ethically, a lot more people agree with it. And they can be voluntarily donated. So even things like the umbilical cord, many parents choose to donate the umbilical cord after birth, when it's no longer needed and it would just be destroyed anyway, and use for getting stem cells. Another benefit, which I haven't written here, but it goes through in some of your worksheets, is that if a person has their own, let's say for example, I had burns to my left arm and the deeper skin cells on that side were destroyed, they could take the stem cells from my right arm and put them onto my left arm, and because I would be donating it to myself, there is less or no risk of tissue rejection, which can happen if, for example, someone's blood types don't match. Okay, so that is another benefit, that a person, if they have healthy stem cells, could donate them to themselves, and there's less likely to be complications. The issues with adult stem cells are mainly around the fact that they are multipotent. So they've already specialized to a degree. They can still become more specialized, but they're already partway through their development, meaning there's less potential for what they can treat. Okay, so if I had damage to all of my blood stem cells, which is often what happens with certain types of cancer, all of my cells, I can't use those blood stem cells because they're already differentiated. Whereas if you had undifferentiated cells, such as the pluripotent cells found in embryonic ones, they could be targeted to become any type of cell. Okay, so benefits and risks of both different types. For the rest of this session, I want you just to work through the rest of those worksheets, pages 2 to 4. There is a bit more information in there. There's a few examples of how they can be used in treatment. And then in your next double, you'll be doing kind of a research ethics-based task, which I will post the information for on Google Classroom. All right, thank you.